Everyone knows the Salem witch trials. They've been turned into movies, books, and even school lessons. But what if I told you Salem was just a spark compared to the raging inferno of witch hunts across Europe? Between the 15th and 18th centuries, more than 40,000 people, mostly women, but also men and even children, were executed under accusations of witchcraft. Imagine that number, an entire town's worth of lives wiped out, not because they were guilty, but because fear made them dangerous, the darkest part. Many of them weren't witches at all. They were midwives, healers, widows, or simply women who spoke too freely in a time when silence was demanded. Picture a small German village in 1628. Winter is harsh, crops are failing, and people are desperate. The church bells ring, not for prayer, but for accusation. A woman is dragged from her home, accused of making a pact with the devil because her neighbor's cow stopped producing milk. She is stripped, tortured, forced to confess to crimes she never committed. By morning, she is burned alive in the town square, while her neighbors, people she grew up with, people who once shared bread at her table, cheer, convinced they have purged evil. This wasn't random superstition, this was politics. Witch trials became tools of control. They allowed rulers to crush dissent, silence strong women, and seize property from the accused. One of the darkest examples unfolded in Würzburg, Germany. Between 1626 and 200 people were executed in a frenzy of accusations. Entire families were destroyed. Children as young as 9 years old were tortured until they confessed to flying with the devil. Think about that, a 9-year-old, broken on the rack, whispering lies just to make the pain stop. In Bamberg, the Prince Bishop built what was called the Drudenhaus, or witch prison. There, men and women were tortured day and night until they admitted to impossible crimes, flying through storms, killing cattle with a glance, sleeping with demons. Their confessions weren't evidence. They were theater, scripted by pain. The Prince Bishop even kept a ledger of stolen property from those executed, turning faith into profit and murder into business. And it wasn't just Germany. Across France, Italy, Scotland, Spain, and Eastern Europe, the story repeated. In the Basque region of Spain, over 7,000 people were accused in the early 1600s. Though the Inquisition eventually realized mass hysteria had gone too far. In Scotland, hundreds of women were strangled and burned after neighbors claimed to see witch marks on their skin. In Italy, healers who used herbs were called servants of Satan. In Poland and Hungary, entire villages were wiped out in waves of suspicion. Witch hunts were contagious. Once one began, accusations spread like fire, each new execution fueling the next. But let's not forget Salem. In 1692, in colonial Massachusetts, fear and rumor took hold of a small Puritan community. Girls collapsed in fits, claiming they were tormented by witches. Ministers fanned the flames, judges believed the lies, and within months, over 200 people were accused. 19 were executed by hanging, and one man, Giles Corey, was crushed to death under stones for refusing to confess. Salem became infamous, but in reality, it was small compared to the European hunts. What made it different was that it happened in America, and America remembered son récit. In England, a woman named Alice Samuel stood in court and denounced the absurdity of her trial, shouting that men feared her voice, not her spells. She still died, but her words echoed through centuries. In other places, skepticism began to grow. Judges like Friedrich Spee, a Germain Jesuit, condemned witch trials after watching countless innocents tortured into confession. He wrote a book, Cautiu Criminalis of the Hunts. His courage planted the seeds of doubt that eventually ended the frenzy. Still, the cruelty reached unimaginable heights. In places like Torsker, Sweden, in 1675, 71 people, including children, were beheaded and burned in a single day. In Estonia, women were drowned in frozen rivers, their innocence or guilt decided by whether they sank or floated. In Switzerland, healers who treated the sick during plague outbreaks were accused of spreading the disease with sorcery. On din Russia, was of witchcraft of leered alive. The truth is that witch hunts were not about witches at all. They were about fear. They were about power. They were about what happens when ordinary people let terror rule their hearts. Neighbors turned into accusers. Judges turned into executioners. And communities burned their own alive, believing they were saving their souls. It was systematic terror dressed up as justice. Think about the psychology when crops failed, when plagues swept towns, when wars drained resources, people demanded answers. And when no answers came, they invented them. It was easier to blame the widow next door than admit that fate, or nature, or bad governance had doomed them. Fear needed a face, and that face became the witch. But here's the haunting part. Is it really just the past? Or do we still live in times where fear is used to silence voices, to control communities, to destroy lives? When we see modern scapegoating, blaming minorities, silencing critics, spreading paranoia, isn't it just another kind of witch hunt? We may not burn people at the stake, but the fire of fear still burns. The darkest witch hunts in history remind us of the human willingness to destroy what we don't understand. They remind us how quickly justice can become cruelty when fear takes over. And they warn us that civilization is only ever a few steps away from repeating the same mistakes. So when you hear the word witch hunt, don't just think of broomsticks and black hats. Think of the mothers who never came home. Think of the children tortured into lies. Think of the smoke that rose over villages while bells rang in triumph. And remember, history doesn't always stay in the past. The echoes of those screams still live among us, warning us what happens when fear wins over reason.